raised in your second interview?
I don't think he did not address my concerns at all.
Okay. And then eventually you faced a termination and then an untermination, and a lawsuit was filed, and there were some procedural things that happened, correct?
Yep.
And one of the results of that was this Cronin investigation, correct?
Yes.
Did you feel like she addressed AR 333 correctly?
No, I do not.
Did she address or follow up on the information about, for example, Sergeant Gallagher's recount of the fact that you offered to go back on tape with Sergeant Lewis during your interview?
No, I only viewed the summary, so I didn't know that information. If you read the summary, you wouldn't know that even happened.
Yeah, she left it out of her report completely, right?
I never saw it until, I never saw it in writing until it was in one of these books as a full transcription.
Okay. What, did she do the same thing related to the information from Chief Pop regarding the fact that Chief Pop had told Chief Slavin from the beginning?
Yeah. The meeting that occurred after I talked to Chief Pop about my being offended, Lieutenant Lynette being offended, he went and told on Thursday, he said that he had a meeting with Chief Robel and Chief Slavin and disclosed that information. That was not included in the summary.
Now, I want to ask you specifically what you meant from a comment that you made in your second interview with Sergeant Lewis, the integrity one. You said, never in a million years did you believe that the comment that you made about being directly offended was going to be taken out of context. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
Why did you say that?
I said that because it was clear to me that I was asked a question, I answered a question, and now this is what's going on. I mean, it baffles my mind this day that this is the level of scrutiny over a single word, and that's it. There's nothing else that's being alleged. I mean, how did you misinterpret? How could you possibly misinterpret what I was asking you? That is how I felt. How I feel to this day. Like, how dare you not agree with me that it meant something different?
Have you ever intentionally lied in your career as a police officer?
No, never.
That's all I have for now.
Cross-examination.
Commander Minor, you were asked a number of questions by your attorney, and you gave us a number of answers in context. We appreciate that. I'd like to know, in your understanding of the policy, does anything you just said impact your obligation to answer questions truthfully and completely?
In my understanding
Of General Order 1411, that states that officers have the obligation to answer truthfully and completely. And my question to you is whether any of the other facts or issues that you've just talked about in response to your attorney's questions, does that have anything to do with your obligation to answer truthfully and completely?
well, that policy is about answering truthfully.
Right, I'm trying to find out if you believe that whatever issues arose between you and Chief Slavin, does that have any impact on your obligation to answer truthfully and completely when you're asked a question by an IA?
I don't think that, I mean, if you're asking me to, I'm confused. Like, you're applying this policy towards my investigation question I answered. And do I think anything, I think I told the truth. I don't think that I violated that policy.
Thank you. Commander Minor, my question is just about your understanding of what the policy requires.
Oh, okay.
You understand the policy requires you to answer questions truthfully and completely, is that right?
Yes.
And whatever the motivation of the people asking you the questions, you agree that you still have to answer
Yes.
truthfully and completely, is
Yes,
that
I
right?
understand. Yes.
You were present in the meeting where Chief Slavin made the comments, correct?
Correct.
You did not laugh when he made the comments, did you?
Not that I remember. No.
Uncomfortably or otherwise, you did not laugh, is that right? Lieutenant Bonnet texted you during that meeting, is that right?
Yeah.
And nobody else texted you, did they?
I don't know. Not that I can recall.
I'll rephrase. Did anyone else in the meeting text you about the comments in the meeting itself?
No.
Lieutenant Bonnet called you after he left the meeting, is that right?
Yeah.
And you spoke with him about the comments that night.
Yeah.
Did you speak with anybody else about the comments that night?
No.
Lieutenant Bonnet brought you the AR-333 complaint that you brought to your supervisor, Assistant Chief Pop, is that right?
Yes.
Did any of your other subordinates lodge an AR-333 complaint with you that you brought to Assistant Chief Pop?
No.
And I asked you about your response to the comments, but Lieutenant Bonnet did not laugh when Chief Slavin made the comments, did he?
I don't think so, no.
Did he laugh at any point when you talked to him about the comments?
Was she?
No.
When you prepared for your interview with IA the second time, you brought a presentation that you had made?
Yes.
Do you recall that generally?
Yes.
Okay. And you have some, I'll just characterize, very detailed descriptions of conversations you had with others. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think you mentioned you had taken notes about your conversations with all of these people. Is that correct?
Well, I want to be clear. Like, I didn't take notes when I talked to people. I made the notes for the internal investigation.
At what point did you start taking notes about your conversations with people?
It would have been the days preceding my interview.
So, do these capture all of the notes that you took on those conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to read every one to make sure there wasn't something in the email that referred to an incident that we talked about. For instance, Commander Luke and I had a meeting for an interview, and I'm sure there's an email that says that we're requested to be there for an interview. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure it talks about the fact that we were together for an interview. There is an email somewhere that says we're going to be there on that Friday for an interview.
So at some point you did decide to commit your memory of all of these conversations in
Yes.
writing?
Yes.
During your conversations with all the individuals that you identified, it seemed to me that you were trying to figure out whether they knew if the comments were offending. Would that be a fair way to characterize your conversations with those people you identified?
It seems, can you ask again?
Okay, I will. You provided a long list of people to IA who you identified as finding the comments offensive. Would you agree with that? You were here when Assistant Chief Slavin testified the other day that he was concerned that you were, in his words, polling people.
Yes.
Okay. And Assistant Chief Slavin was correct, was he not? You were keeping track of people's offense reactions to his comments?
I wasn't calling people, as you're describing in Chief Slavin just said.
And before we move on this issue with Chief Pop and sick pay and all that stuff, Chief Pop didn't know what he was talking about with sick pay, did he? You received some,
Chief Pop didn't know what he was talking
Okay.
about.
With
That's the last word I didn't.
oh, I'm sorry, with respect to sick pay.
Okay,
And
thank
my
you.
question is, you received all of your sick pay when you retired, is that right?
So, if you ask me like three questions. The first question, I would believe that Chief Pop would know about my sick pay. Okay, I mean, so, I don't know if you're asking like, should he, or, I don't know if he did. I don't believe the question was asked of him when he was on the stand. The second thing, yes, I did receive it after emails and phone calls to HR because HR also told me in November of 19 that I would not receive it. So both my boss and HR told me I would not receive my payout of my sick time bank. And then in March, I was told by HR I would not receive it because I was terminated. I didn't leave willingly, or things she said. I didn't resign or retire with 2 weeks' notice, what she said. That was required. And the emails and phone calls I made to the HR department, including the director, that is when I eventually was funded. So yes,
So you did receive all that money?
yes, after I sold out.
I'd like to ask you some questions about this conversation that you had, quote, off the record after your first interview with Internal Affairs. Do you remember that conversation?
Well, you said off the record in air quotes, so I had a conversation after he shut off the tape. That's what you're referring to.
I am. It's been described by that, by other witnesses. So, what did you say to Sergeant Lewis after the tape was turned off that day?
Well, I couldn't tell you exactly what I said, but I can tell you what my intent was, and like I testified to, that I wanted you to explain to him what I had told Chief Pop and how I believed his response was that this investigation was being handled. It was being handled differently than I believed it should be. That was, do you want to hear that information? I'm willing to go back on tape to have it.
So you said you don't, my question was about what you remember about your words. I understand that your intent might be different than maybe what you would have said out loud. So just very narrowly, what do you recall about the words that you spoke to Sergeant Lewis?
The words I spoke, how it was handled by Chief Rob Bell, how it requested or I had gone to Chief Pop with my offense and Lieutenant Bonnet's offense, and basically said they are a violation. And then, what those are the 2 things, and go back on tape would be the last part of that. Well, let's talk about how it was handled.
And Commander, I want to be very clear. Is it your testimony that you told Sergeant Lewis, off the record, off tape, following your first interview, that you wanted to talk about Chief Pop?
My testimony, you just asked me to try to recall the exact words, is that I had a conversation with him about wanting to talk about Chief Ravel, Chief Pop, and everything that had transpired after the May 9th meeting.
Okay, and again, I understand that the intent and the words are different, and so I want to make sure that we understand we're talking about your words. Are you testifying before this board that you mentioned Chief Pop's name to Sergeant Lewis after the tape was turned off?
No, I'm not testifying he used his name. I understand what you're asking.
Okay.
Yes.
And I have the same question about Lieutenant Bonnet. Are you sitting here testifying that you used Lieutenant Bonnet's name in that conversation with Sergeant Lewis?
No, I'm not. I understand the question.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may we have a brief restroom break?
Speak up, I can't hear.
May we have a brief restroom break? We've been going for an hour and a half.
Okay, Council is asleep.
I have very few questions left.
Okay, well, it's council's request, I made a comment at the very beginning of these proceedings that someone needs a break. We will take one, it is now about 6:12. Will 12:20 be okay?
Literally 5 minutes would be fine.
Okay, well, let's go to 12:15.